Well, hello and welcome to what is the 68th edition of the Adoption and Fostering Podcast with me, Al Coates, and...
his sidekick, Scott Casson-Renee.
Oh, you are provocative.
I don't care.
Man on the edge.
Don't care. Do not care. Don't care. I don't ever said don't care enough.
I think we've got the message that you are today a man on the very edge of caring and not caring, clearly not caring.
Yeah.
Oh, it's the summer, isn't it? We're all giddy with the summer.
This heat. Honesty.
Oh, I know. It got to 25 in Northumberland.
We're different places, aren't we? So, yeah, it's been very warm here today. Very warm. Yes,
at one point I even opened the window in my office, which is unheard of in Northumberland.
It is, yeah. Because, it's I mean, even to let oxygen into your little man cave is just...
I took off my podcast and... I took off my balaclava. I don't know why I said podcast.
I'm more worried you've got a balaclava, to be honest with you.
Doesn't everyone? I've got a proper ski mask three-hole balaclava.
No, not everybody does. We have them down south if you're going to rob someone.
All right. Okay.
Just so you know, yeah.
There you go. Standard issue up here.
You actually came up in conversation tonight because it's J-Man's birthday in a couple of days.
Boom.
And we were talking about what he'd want, and Grandad said, "Well, why don't we just buy him some knives?" And I was like, "No, just go the whole hog and do an Al Coates and buy him some axes." He was whittling a stick with a Stanley blade. I caught him doing that the other day, and I was like, "Okay, Stanley blade, give here. Thank you very much."
It's a healthy occupation for a child. Very healthy occupation.
Creepers, honestly. The thing is, he was being all right with it. He was being a typical boy. It was just the fact that he just went and helped himself from the back of the shed, from the locked drawer. All this, you can imagine, can't you?
Well, once again, you offend me with your gender stereotypes. But again, mixing it up. No, I was teaching Peanut how. Well, maybe I should save that story. I'll tell you the story now, and then we should get on with the interview. But
all right, okay.
I went away, and I was with Zippy in his garden, and we were skipping, and it's as you do. And the skipping.
Alan Zippy skipping.
As you do. And we were doing it, and. Lottie and Peanut were jumping in, and they jumped in and they failed slightly, and then the skipping rope caught Peanut, flipped her in the air, landed on her elbow, and well, we all laughed initially because that's what you do when you see people hurt themselves. Felt bad because she hurt herself, and then because I was aware she was sharing a bed with me, and she was like, it was like a disco dancing octopus all night, screaming in agony, and I thought, no. Yeah. So we got up and I said, we have to take her to hospital. And the good Mrs. C said, she's fine. So we went off to Chessington World of Adventure. And then that night I said, I think we should take her. She went, she's fine. I'm going to put it all on her. She's fine. So we came home. So 48 hours later, I went to hospital. She's broken her elbow.
Whoops.
She thinks it's hilarious. She's going to dine out on that story forever.
But, so that's an interesting one. Because we've done that with broken fingers before. It's not the same as an elbow, obviously, which is a bit more extreme. Obs.
As is my life.
So, but yeah, exactly. But how are you feeling about that?
Well, in the context of my life and social care involvement, I felt quite nervous. The fact that it would be because it's a category of abuse, isn't it? A failure to get medical attention, timely medical attention.
Yeah.
And I thought that's all I need on my rap sheet right now.
Yeah,
but I'll be fine. I'm okay. Anyway,
well, as long as you're feeling all right with it.
Yeah, and she's fine. She's fine. She's forgiven me.
This stuff happens, doesn't it? As a parent, it doesn't matter how you become a parent. This stuff happens.
All
right.
It's universal.
Fall over. And I saw your tweet today actually, and I'm sorry, but there's a lot more bigger fish to fry out there.
Whoa!
There's a lot more safeguarding concerns than just your one.
I think the best, it's like 2 weeks before people were taking their children going, well, he was limping for another 2 weeks. And if you can find the thread, by the time this comes out, if you can find the thread, it is just hilarious.
Hilarious.
The stories.
It's very funny.
I feel.
I can't share all 25 of my medical dramas on there because I would literally, find myself in the clink. So
there you go.
I'm joking, by the way. Joking.
Joking.
Anyway,
Anyway, Andrew Christie.
Yeah.
All right, I was waiting for you to say something witty, but you're obviously failing dismally. No,
Andrew Christie, yeah.
Head of
that was the day that was. I was there, but I wasn't there, which is quite weird.
It was you were like a shadowy presence just hovering around.
I had to go off and do something else.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Anyway. I invited him to come on because he's come on every year since he started, which has been very generous.
He's very good. He's very, very amenable, isn't he? I think it's almost like this is his little megaphone.
Do you think? He reaches out?
I don't know. Yeah, he just says, I know we're doing it this way and we're doing it that way, but this is how I want to do it. And, obviously having listened to the interview, he's mentioned ARG, which started off as My Little Baby. And
the adopter reference group.
Adopter reference group, which started off as Adoption Support User Group with Ed Timpson, with Mr. T, big old Mr. T.
Boom.
And it's kind of progressed into the ARG.
Yeah.
Which is fab.
So shall we put the interview on and then
stick on, because then I'm going to yak on that, let's face it.
Yeah, you're going to kick right off, I've heard.
I'm going to go mental.
So here we are. We have an interview with Andrew Christie, who is the current
He the man.
Oh, you are so street, Scott. You are down with the kids.
If you say that, you're not down with the kids.
Oh,
I've been told that. If you say you're down with the kids, you're not actually down with the kids.
Yeah.
Just FYI. So there's note to self. Put a little note on your little pad.
Get my pen out.
Anyway, stick this interview on with Andrew.
Yeah, he's the head of the Adoption and Special Guardianship.
He's the chair.
He's the chair of the Adoption and Special Guardianship Leadership Board. Here we go.
There you go.
Andrew, thank you for coming on the podcast. And
thank you for inviting me.
I think I twisted your arm. I've got lots of questions and we put some out there, but one of my first questions is we're at a stage where you just had your contract renewed and they've invited you to stay on after 3 years. So thinking across those 3 years, is there anything that sort of stands out as something that you feel you've achieved or...
Very good and big question. So I think some of the things that we have achieved, because I don't describe it as a kind of personal achievement. One of the things I'm very clear about is the board and the leadership the board provides is a collective leadership. So some of the things I think that we've done, which hopefully are beginning to make a difference, is one, actually, we've established the adopter reference group, which wasn't in place, but it was a different set of arrangements, because I felt like there needed to be more representation of the kind of the voice of the people who are actually experiencing adoption. So, of course, then that raises a question about who else should we be going forward into the next phase. So I think that, that's progress we've made. What we still probably aren't doing enough of is finding out more about the experiences of children and young people who've actually experienced adoption.
That's a good. That was one of my later questions. So can I ask you that now, because that sounds natural?
Yeah.
Is that the voice of adoptees seem consistently not present in any of the meetings, or very rarely, other than people who've perhaps found themselves in this profession and become in a professional role with a coincident. Is that something you want to do, and is that something you're going to do?
It's certainly something I want to do. Your challenge after my 3-year review point is it's something that I need to make a commitment that we will do. But I have to say at the same time I recognise that it's not an easy thing to do. But that said, there are the first kind of steps being made. There's a lot of good examples out there where people have done work with young people who are experiencing, who are adopted, and so probably the first step, as I think about it, as we're talking about it, is that we need to kind of perhaps be a bit more systematic about drawing some of that together to look at what. So rather than kind of try and kind of refashion things ourselves, it's kind of build on what already exists. So so I need to kind of. So I say yes, we will do it. It's probably not clearly enough set out in our list of priorities going forward. As I'm speaking to you, I'm reaching for my notebook to kind of make a note about it, making sure that we can do brilliant to our priorities.
I think that what we see sort of in the social media world, that the voice of adoptees is sometimes there's no one voice. That's absolutely clear, and I don't want to speak on behalf of adoptees, and that's the issue. How do we collate them? But would it be something where you'd want to put adoptees into the adoption and into the actual leadership board to have a representative on there? And I'm putting you on the spot.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, my experience of working with and engaging with and listening to the experience of young people, which is more based on the experience of young people in care, but there are real parallels, is actually just putting one person on their own into a situation, a kind of board membership, is actually an awfully big ask of a young person.
One person,
so generally speaking, I think it works much better if you work in kind of situation where the young people perhaps have somebody who supports them and helps them to kind of collect their kind of views and articulate their views and supports them in that activity, and that it works better if people like me go out to meet those young people in groups rather than the young person being asked to come and try and kind of cope with that kind of whole room full of adults who kind of have a kind of particular kind of approach to things. So that would be the kind of style that I'd be tending to.
I mean, that's open to a censorship kind of accusation, isn't it?
My experience of this is if you get the right people to be working and supporting those young people, and I've come across some very skilled people doing this kind of work, is that actually there's no way they can act as a kind of filter or as a kind of buffer or as a kind of screen. Because they create an environment where the young people would be telling you that if they were going to be doing that kind of thing, and it's not that I think one can tell, not just me but others can tell, when it is a refined version you're getting of the truth rather than young people just being enabled to say what they need to say.
And I guess you refer to young people and children, but obviously adoption is an issue that is lifelong.
Yeah.
So would you be interested in having older adoptees?
I think I would.
Yeah.
I think there's, and you talked about the fact that actually there are many professionals who are working in this field and that I work with who have an experience, who have been adopted themselves. How can I put this sensitively? Sometimes, though, they're talking about an experience of adoption which is a different world of adoption.
Like a different systemic.
Quite a different system, different set of circumstances in a time when adoption was less of children from care, where they'd been removed as a result of court intervention, and more as a result of their parents usually relinquishing them for adoption. That doesn't mean to say there aren't parallels, and absolutely. But I'd certainly I think we should be talking about, so if people can help me, get in touch with groups of young people who've also got an experience of adoption, then absolutely that's what we should be doing.
So thinking, is there a place that we can sort of people could be focused towards? Is there I guess I am putting you totally on the hoof, so I apologise. But even if after this interview you were to think through maybe that there's an email address for people who would be happy to contribute.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Some ideas and thoughts. Absolutely, there is an email address. I've kind of not got it to hand, so we ought to kind of make it available, which is a contact which is run by the Adoption and Special Guardianship Leadership Board. There is a kind of way of making contact with me through the kind of board arrangements. So we just need to make that available to people. And
so that could be the start of people volunteer, different sorts of people.
Yes, people who think that they might be able to help me and others have conversations and engage with and listen to the experience of young people, young adults, and also children have been adopted. I think it's really important.
Because in talking to some adoptees, there's sort of the post-children act and pre and post Children Act is kind of a watershed in systems, and there's been other changes. But the sort of the universality of separation, loss, trauma, and that includes recruitment of adopters and preparation of adopters. That sort of is a universal, some of that's quite universal.
Absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you're right, kind of, we're coming up to the 30-year anniversary of the Children Act, so actually the current system has been in operation for really quite a long time.
So you could have adoptees, who in their early 40s, up to potentially...
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Who've experienced that. So I feel that was a good answer. I'm sorry to put you on the spot.
Helpful.
You were saying about your 3 years, and I interrupted that point. You were talking about your 3 years and what you'd achieved.
Oh, yes, yeah. So going back to kind of thinking about what we've achieved in that time, I think we've got a very clear set of priorities we're working to. So I think one of the other things that I think we've made progress on is we are needing to focus much more on the experience after the order is made.
Yeah.
So and that's partly again as a result of talking to adopters and special guardians. So perhaps a better understanding of the significance of the need to get the support arrangements right, and the kind of discussions we're having, which I've been really kind of influenced by, which is about how people talking about how their support needs change over time, and their understanding of what they need by way of support changes over time. And so we're now got a whole program of work which we're hopefully going to conclude, which will hopefully set out kind of plans and proposals around about how we can make significant improvements to the support offer, building on things like what I consider to be the great success of things like the Adoption Support Fund.
Yeah.
So I think one of our achievements has been actually kind of shifting the focus, rather than building on the kind of real concentration on what's happening to children, about whether children are being provided the opportunity to be adopted, whether people are being provided the right kind of opportunity to become adopters, and then what happens thereafter.
Yeah.
Because so I think that was something that was perhaps not kind of sufficiently clear for in the kind of previous kind of time. So
thinking about the future, because I'm aware you've got limited time, so I'm going to I want to get through all my questions, so I apologise. You're thinking about you've got another 3-year term ahead of you. Is there sort of things in your head you're thinking those are points that I really would like to see achieved in that year? Yeah.
So I think we will, by the end of this year, be clear about at least 6 to 8 things, which are the kind of our priorities for action in terms of kind of next steps around improving the post-order support arrangements. So things like we had a very interesting discussion about the issues adopters face and their children face in terms of kind of education and schooling. So there are some opportunities for us to perhaps bring about some changes that might increase the likelihood that is a better experience for some families, many families. So that's what I'm going to be kind of aiming to kind of put in place at the end of this calendar year.
Right. And across the 3 years, is there sort of bigger issues that you would hope to ask or look or consider?
Yes, I mean, so what we'll have is a kind of sort of a kind of stepped program.
Yeah.
Some short-term objectives, some medium and longer-term objectives. We'll be wanting to share those kind of plans with as many people as possible, so that people can say, yeah, you got this right, or no, you haven't. And we've done quite a lot of work already to kind of build it on what people are telling us. We need to continue to do that. We will do that through the kind of...
You're not giving me any specifics, though.
No, well, because there's so many.
Right, okay.
Kind of, it's not easy just to kind of... I'm trying to think of one, example to kind of pick out, but I don't want people to then kind of latch onto that and say... I think one thing I'm really clear about is I want to do absolutely everything that can be done to continue the future of the Adoption Support Fund beyond the time that this government has given its commitment to. So beyond the end of the end of the kind of financial year 2020 or the end of the year 2020. So success for me will be a continuation of the Adoption Support Fund. Maybe in a kind of slightly altered state, but still a ring-fenced fund that is absolutely clear that adopters and special guardians can look at and say, yes, that is available for us going forward into the future. And people who step forward to become adopters or to take on special guardianship have confidence that it's going to be available going forward into the future.
Because that's a big issue, and I guess it's been not talked to death, but it's an issue that is just very current and will remain so until there's some sort of conclusion to that.
And the second thing, if you want me to give now...
Well, I'm tempted to turn the screw, but I don't know whether...
I'll give you a second. So I think what's become very clear to me is the value for adopters and special guardians of peer support and arrangements which are supported to make sure that those kind of opportunities happen and available. In many parts of the country they do exist, but not reliably so. So again, what I'd like to kind of reach a kind of position before I give up this role is that right across the country, those who become adopters and those who assume responsibility for special guardianship have an offer which is an opportunity to meet with people who are in.
So there's some infrastructure for that.
Some support for that. Because where I've seen that happen, it's so powerful, so strong.
I know there's some bigger picture things that you're doing, and I think contact is an issue that I know is on the podcast and in any Twitter, any social media conversation, talk about contact. And a different way of doing it, a different way of thinking. And is that something that's one of the big questions you're asking?
It is one of the really big questions. And we are framing that as being, one way of looking at it is about contact, but contact can mean a variety of different things. The other way of looking at it is how do we help children and young people who are adopted or in special guardianship order arrangements get a better understanding of their identity and their background, their origins, and why they are where they are in life. And I think if we can get the right kind of arrangements in place around about that, and that for me, as I've learned talking to adopters and special guardianship guardians, is something that changes over time as their own understanding of their child's needs changes as their child grows and asks different questions. So one of the things I'm very keen to do is kind of make far more sophisticated the kind of response, the support that's available to families. And it is wrong. So Beth Neal's research is very influential for me, where she finds that far too often there is a default position of letterbox contact, which isn't actually very well organised and supported, and of course doesn't happen as a consequence. And part of the key to that, so another thing I'd like to see at the end of my tenure, is a far more consistent offer to birth families at the time when children are removed, because I think that's not only in the interest of birth families, birth parents, but actually it's also in the interest of the adopted children and adoptive families. Because if you can get a better relationship or an improved relationship in those birth families with a better understanding of what's happened to them and new opportunities for them going forward, potentially if they choose to try and become parents again in the future, they're more likely to be able to get to a more kind of positive view about the fact that their children previously have been adopted and kind of help them to understand what's the best way of making sure that is the best both they and their children can get the best out of that arrangement.
Because letterbox is often seen as the most adoptive families will accept and the least and the best that the birth families can hope for. And do you think we'll ever, and this is a question I'm asking lots of people the same question, do you think there'll ever be a time or a place where we'll have a presumption of contact in the courts, as now where there's and evidence say why not.
Yeah.
Or the flip, which we've got now, against the flip, which we've got now, which is presumption of...
Well, you and your fellow adopters and special in the adopter reference group make a very good point, which is, as an adoptive parent, you are the legal guardian. You therefore are the people who have the kind of...
the power.
If that's the right expression. The authority, actually, to make the decision on behalf of their children. And that's the point of adoption. So at the moment, I see a world where it's not a presumption there'll be a contact, but there's a presumption that the right arrangements will be put in place, the right support will be put in place, which will help adoptive families make more sense of arrangements which might include contact, might even include direct contact. And many adopters that I talk to talk about the kind of very positive experiences that they've had about that, where it's kind of properly arranged and organised. And I also recently listened to a birth parent talking about her experience where the right kind of support arrangements have been put in place, and where she... what's happened as a result of that has been a much more kind of positive experience for not just for her but also for her adopted child and for the adopted family.
So that's a practice change as opposed to a legal change.
Yes.
And so does your, and I think I talked to you this at the end of meetings and things, does your role and your remit and your authority as the head of the Adoption Special Guardianship Leadership Board, do you have influence to affect that change within the RAAs? Can you make them do it?
No, I can't make them do it.
Right.
So I have no direct executive authority in my role. I think, as we've talked previously about this. So what I seek to do is to seek to build a consensus, because consensus is much more powerful than direction in my experience.
Yeah.
And so if we can build a professional consensus, and we can build a kind of sort of shared understanding about what is likely to work, what's likely to be better for children and families, then that is more likely to help us land the change. I will be seeking to do whatever I can to cajole, to influence, to persuade, and sometimes to ask others, potentially, through things like regulation or legislation. We can do that. The scope is pretty limited at the moment, but we shouldn't give up on that.
Policy guidance,
make some change. And policy guidance, absolutely. We don't. I mean, what we want to avoid is producing policy guidance which sits on some electronic shelf and gathers electronic dust.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's not going to help anybody.
Well, this sort of segues into my next question, which is about regionalisation. And sort of Alex Morton was asking a question on Twitter about... is there some chance of publicity about regionalisation, how and when, and how that effect might be received and comprehended? So he had a lot of questions about RAAs, but really, is there a concern that the information's not getting out?
Yeah, I mean, and as you know, we've just talked about this in the adopter reference group. And in fact, the day before, yesterday, we also talked about this in something called the Regional Adoption Agency Steering Group, which is the Department for Education. I'm probably revealing things because it's not a public meeting. But this whole issue of information, publicity and engagement with adopters was very kind of prominent in the discussion we've had today and indeed yesterday. And what's pretty clear to me is that we haven't got it right yet. Far too many, the very useful and interesting Adoption UK Adoption Barometer report, which is Paul's going to be looking at next week, highlights this as well, that far too many adopters are still not even clear whether or not their service is now part of a regional adoption agency or not.
And if so, where are they in all those sort of
questions? If so, who should they be in touch with? And if so, where can they turn to for help? And I understand the difficulty of the organisational change that is establishment of regional adoption agencies, but I still think more effort needs now to be put into kind of helping other people, particularly the adoption community, understand, and the special guardianship community, understand more about what is happening, where is your local regional adoption agency, how does it operate, how do you make contact with them.
One question by Outwork Alive was, It was a question in relation to turnover of staff, and sort of talking about in 12 post-adoption support workers across 4 years. And I think that one of the 2020 Vision for Change adoption document produced by the DfE and the Minister talked a lot about social worker development. But I see that fading from the agendas, or just never really getting on the agendas, even of the regionalisation.
It's not faded from my agenda, so I say that very clearly.
That's
so
right.
to you and to the other listeners to your podcast. So in fact, it's something I could add to that list of things you asked me about earlier on about what do I want to achieve and what do we want to achieve is so one of the things I think we need to kind of do is to kind of there is a professional development CPD program which has been developed, which is all about helping social workers understand better issues relating to permanence, which of course includes adoption. And it's been a lot of work's been done on it, but it hasn't actually been implemented. It is one of my aims to make sure that it is implemented and that we make it available to social workers. And we kind of...
Why has it not been implemented?
Well, because that's a good question. I don't know the answer to that, and I think it's other issues have been workforce issues have been prioritised. So it's my job to say this needs to be a priority now going forward, and that I've already begun that work, and this is something that the board has identified as a priority. So I think that's merely one action. I think terrible to kind of hear the kind of account of 12 in 3 years.
4 years.
4 years. And that's in the adoption service, which is generally regarded, as you and I know, because we're both, or you're a social worker and I've been a social worker, is generally one of the areas in children's services where there's greater stability than many other areas. So that is really where I think the transition into regional adoption agencies has caused more instability than perhaps we would have wanted. And so I do think that as your regional adoption agency becomes established, I expect the staffing to become more stable. That's on the adoption service side. That's certainly my experience of managing these kind of changes and transitions, so that we could then get back to a position whereby people are more likely to feel confident about having somebody who is there providing more continuity. I think the other area where we have real issues around about social work turnover is actually in the social workers who've got responsibility for the childcare planning up to the point that the adoption order is made. That's tough enough to crack, but again, what I would hope with this kind of professional development program is that we can encourage more people to kind of feel more confident about their area of work. It's just something we've got to continue to work away with local authorities and voluntary adoption agencies, mostly local authorities, of course, in regard to kind of children's social work.
So I'm down to my last 3 questions.
Yep.
I'm going to ask you the one that I got from the Centre of Adoption, which is in relation to international adoption.
Right.
Can you ask the board, can you ask Andrew, do the government plan to monitor children from care being placed abroad with connected people? No central data exists and no consistency around post-placement. Some have ended up in risky situations back in different countries.
Well, I can't answer for the government on this. It's certainly something. This is not the first kind of prompt I've recently had on this issue.
Right.
So it's clearly an emerging issue. Although of course it's not a new issue, but it's probably getting kind of more attention. The difficulty, of course, is that once a child goes to live in another country, as you will know, the kind of state system in this country has no jurisdiction.
Yeah.
Unless there is some matter of international family law, and that's much more usually about where perhaps somebody's abducted a child and taken a child abroad. Then, of course, there are kind of arrangements that it's not easy to kind of initiate, but there are arrangements where steps can be put in place to effectively rescue that. Maybe what we just need to be ask some more questions about So, of course, what needs to happen in the first instance is if these arrangements are initiated as a result of proceedings in the UK, that proper due diligence takes place to make sure that whatever is being proposed is properly thought through and planned for and is as safe as it can be possibly made. So that's probably a short answer to that kind of very big question.
That's a big, complicated question that involves international law, which I think is way above my pay grade. One question I have, which is a question which has buzzed around for a long time, is in relation to transracial adoption, because I think that it's an issue where children of colour are overrepresented
in the care system.
People of colour are underrepresented in the adoption system. And so that creates this environment where it just creates this interesting mix where children of colour are placed in white families, or they could be placed in white families. To me, that's kind of this big issue that's I've never really had a satisfactory answer. Is that something that we can monitor? Because I know we don't monitor that, the ethnicity of adopters versus children.
That's a very good point. So we don't. So I will ask the question as whether or not we can. Because it is a very relevant issue. I mean, the kind of law makes it clear that there is no obstacle to...
It was changed, wasn't it?
Exactly. There's no obstacle to what we might describe as transracial kind of placements. Or kind of placements of children from particular ethnic backgrounds with families of different kind of backgrounds. What we all know, don't we, from experience and of listening to people who have had that experience in the past, that it can be both a very positive experience and it can be a negative experience. And what we
both at the same time.
And what we probably also know is that actually the risks of a negative experience can be addressed and mitigated. So we should never be in the kind of position, in my judgment, of making rigid judgments. So you must do one thing or you must do the other thing. I think it's an issue that people really, professionals really struggle with to kind of coming to kind of work out what the kind of right kind of approaches are. I think part of the answer actually lies, and there's a lot of interest in this at the moment, and it's again something that I'm keen for the board to support, is extending the reach of recruitment of adopters into some of the Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities that we haven't reached thus far. I really welcome the fact that the Department for Education's kind of funding of activities in the National Adoption Week coming up in October is actually kind of very specifically designed to support specific initiatives to reach out into some of those communities in ways that we haven't managed in the past. I know that from conversations I've had, for example, with representatives of the Muslim community, they probably think there is not enough work has been done to reach into those communities, and there is much more potential than we've managed to realise in the past. So I think part of the answer is because actually we've got an issue about recruiting adopters anyway. We are a multicultural society, so we've got to reach all parts, haven't we? We've got to be attractive to all parts of the community. And that, of course, also brings in its way kind of new opportunities for children. But of course, the fact is we're a very complex society as well, aren't we? And
and different across the regions as well.
Absolutely. So in some communities, it's still the case that they are predominantly white communities,
hugely.
And so for children of not white in those communities, there are kind of some very particular issues. But if you look at other communities, like where we are at the moment and happen to be in London, is that where it is so diverse that actually, and I can remember when I was running services and you were thinking about kind of matches of children. Well, the sort of mix of kind of ethnic kind of background of the children we were talking about sometimes are so kind of varied and complicated that there was no obvious, straightforward kind of, you're never going to find an exact match anyway. So the fact of the matter is that you've got to have a very flexible approach, in my view, when it comes to the matching. But answers are increase the choice, increase the reach, but also have flexibility about the matching arrangement.
And I guess my question hints this idea that you measure what matters.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think I know that the data set nearly got close to having those questions asked, and I think it may be pulled back because the question is, well, why ask those questions? I think that this is an issue where the answer is because we need to know.
Yeah,
and
the other thing we need to know is not just about what matches are being made, but what are some of the subsequent life experiences of the children that we're talking about, because that's frankly more relevant. And is that, and that's one of the things that the board actually, again, you asked me what I hope to achieve. I'm gradually building the kind of
portfolio. You're writing a list as you go.
And one of the things we're also got a piece of work doing at the moment is to actually, can we do better about measuring what the outcomes and experiences for children who are adopted.
Well, that is a beautiful segue into my final question, and you know why I'm asking this one. Children who then re-enter care from adoption, and I know that it's an issue that's been campaigned on by sort of special guardians and adopters together, really looking to say we don't know how many. It's a grey area of how many children. And even the language of a breakdown or a disruption or all of that's a complicated language, but in essence, children who re-enter care from their adoptive homes. Or is that something, do you think we should measure?
Well, we do. We're supposed to. And we don't do it well. Because actually every local authority produces something called a 903 return at the end of every year, which has in child-level data. Let me reassure all your listeners, it's highly confidential, protected.
It's sort of anonymised.
It's all coded, so it's not something that people could even hack into, could necessarily kind of work out who we're talking about. But they produce very detailed returns which cover every child that's subject to a child protection plan, every child that's in care, every child that leaves care for adoption or special guardianship or other form of permanence, or leaves for any other reason. And then every child that enters care.
The reason for entry.
And the reason for entry. And one of the codes that local authorities are supposed to use, which I'm trying to get local authorities to use more frequently, more reliably, is a code which says the child is re-entering care having from a family where they entered that family as a result of leaving care. Convoluted way of saying adopted or special guardianship. So they're supposed, every local authority should be able to say at the end of the year, this is how many children we have. It's extraordinary that it doesn't get filled in accurately, because surely to goodness, it's one of the most obvious things you're going to be understanding as you're trying to meet the needs of the child who's re-entering care, that this child is coming from an adoptive placement or special guardianship or replacement. So I think that data will get better. I think part of the reason why the data is very good is because it's still a relatively infrequent event, which is a good thing, really good thing, isn't it? But we need to get it right for those children for whom that is what happens in life. And I absolutely agree with you that it is wrong to use words like expressions like breakdown, because it is a re-entry into care, and re-entry into care still has many, many possibilities. One of which, of course, is possibly child returns to family. Families still have a really, really important part to play, even if the child is in the care system. We all have our own family experiences, don't we? Or many of us do, where the fact the child isn't living with us isn't the fact that the child is not part of our family, and it's central to our family life. Yeah,
so that's a complicated picture. And just perhaps a follow-on, I did promise as last, but is there a reason why they're not entering that? Or where is that data published? Is that, or does it remain Is it nationally?
It's nationally available. It'll be part of the statistical return. What you probably, because it's such small numbers, the rules about publication of data like this is that if it's less than 10 children, or less than 5, I can't remember which, you can't say the exact number
because it's identifiable.
So it gets published as suppressed data, usually as an asterisk. Right. You can then know it's less than 10 or less than 5. I can't remember which. But what you can at least do is you'll get the overall number published. And we should ask the question this year of how many were recorded as being in such circumstance, and I will do that. That's something that I'll take away from
Will you?
This.
Well, that's a result. Well, thank you very much, and you've been so generous with your time, and we're in this little office that's as hot can be in here.
Yeah, it is.
Melt. So thank you very much for your time. Hope you have a great summer, and the podcast will go out in a couple of weeks, and hopefully we'll get that email put up there. We'll put all that information, but people will then come and hold you to account.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. Yeah, no, absolutely, and that's fair enough. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk to your listeners.
Thank you.
Well, there you had it. I thought he was very, very generous and open and honest, and I like the.
He's getting more open and honest the more times he comes on as well. He's forgetting who he's talking to. Well, this has actually been recorded.
Well, no, I thought he was very candid, and he did know, and I copied him into tweets, so he did see some of the questions come through the Twitterverse. But I thought he was. I mean, I'm not so naive to believe that he's all powerful, and he spoke to that effect.
Because I don't think he is, has he?
No, he's got no executive powers. Which he acknowledged, but he can. I think the phrase he used in the middle there, he talked about building a professional consensus, and I think that's really helpful to focus the vision and minds of the Adoptive Leadership Board. But what I was really keen before I went in was I wanted to ask him some really specific questions, and it's probably the most determined I've been. So obviously, what did you think of what he said about adoptees having sort of a presence and input? That was a big sigh.
Well, because I feel like I'm going to get hung out to dry on this one, but actually I'm just going to say it like it is. So here we go. You ready?
I'm strapping in, fizzy drink in hand.
Yeah. So, well, let's face it. It doesn't matter what your connection is with adoption, all right? We've all had to fight for that place around the table. It has not been easy, all right? You know, I went to a round table probably 11 years ago with some minister. I can't even remember who it was.
Gove.
Back then. Was it Gove? Yes,
yes,
it was Michael Gove, wasn't it? Yes. And I think he was one of the first that actually held that sort of forum.
Because you've never told me that story before.
What? That I went to a round table with Michael Gove?
Yeah.
Have I or have I not? Are you taking the mickey? You're taking the mickey, aren't you?
Keep going.
See, no, I don't want to talk anymore. That's it.
Oh, don't get in a huff. Right, so
I'm going to get in a huff now.
No, don't get in a huff.
So anyway, but these things started off, all right?
Yep.
And we have had to continually fight for our place around the table in the same way that birth parents have to be consulted with. And we're now getting into this position where, and we know this from Twitter, let's face it, or any social media platform, the kind of older adoptees are now beginning to be able to share their stories. Not all adoptees can do it. Not all adoptees have a voice in terms of being able to share that. Some of them aren't happy. Some of them are, reflective and balanced.
A spectrum of views.
This is it. And yeah, there is a massive spectrum of views. But in the same way that those experiences are now being kind of highlighted in terms of their voice, it's the same thing. It's exactly the same thing where the voices are very, very important, but they've not been able to, the experiences have been very different up until now. So we're now getting to the stage where there's a generation of adoptees who have gone through a system of what our children have experienced, so neglect, abuse, and all that kind of stuff.
Which he talked about, the Children Act, 30 years this year since the Children Act.
Exactly, yeah. But that generation is just finding its voice, literally. And,
Oh, that's a really interesting phrase. I really like that.
What?
No, there's just the idea that the Children Act generation is finding its voice.
Well, I think that's true. I really do think that's true, because it was kind of, there's a crossover between that and the previous kind of experience.
Yeah.
But equally, I'm just here to do what's right for my children. I'm not here to do anything else by that. It's not for me. I don't get anything out of it. If anything, what I get out of it is knowing that my three children will become what they become. I have no expectations. I want them to do well. I want them to be independent, but they will be what they are. I'm still here for them at the end of the day. But if they wanted to get involved and do stuff like that, then fine, fair enough. Off you go. Quite happy to take it, but I can't speak for them, and that's the point.
No,
they need to speak for themselves. So when there's people out there who can speak, let them speak.
Yeah,
I just have this. Oh, it just really just makes me want to bang my fist, because adopters at the minute are being accused of being this and that and the next thing, and yet what we've had to do is advocacy at the end of the day, to make sure that our children, and I even feel bad at the minute saying our children, but they are our children. But all we want to do is make sure that our children get what they need to be able to grow up and become part of a world that has demands of them. Okay, whether we like it or not, the world has demands. It has demands of me, it has demands of you. We're all affected by this in some way, shape or form. Mm-hmm. There is different levels. Again, spectrum. Yeah, we haven't experienced the kind of the things that our children have experienced, but we are living with it without knowing about it, if that makes sense. So we're all kind of under the same roof.
Well, I think that you raise a really interesting point.
Without making a point.
No, I totally get you. I totally get your point. The idea is that it's easy to paint in really binary kind of positions of adoptees are one thing, adopters are another thing, that birth parents are another thing. And the reality is that every story is unique. However, there are general themes that we can see through that, and we see that birth parents are generally marginalised, adoptees are generally unheard, and adopters are generally the ones holding the most chips.
Yeah.
But within that, there are stories that buck that trend, that run against that kind of general pattern. And it feels like that now is a time for adoptees, hopefully, to be able to step into a place where they can advocate for themselves, or advocate for those of them behind. Because obviously my 8-year-old is going to struggle to advocate in this context, and she's 8, so she's on a journey. It's like the X Factor. And birth parents, and also, like you said, this really, I love that phrase. This idea of the Children Act generation is finding its voice, and that's exactly what's happening. But any new movement of people, that is going to come with all kinds of tensions, and obviously we're jockeying for limited positions at the table.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
We like you say, we fought to get a seat at the table for the government, and now I'm not pretending that we've done anything particularly special by sort of me just asking a question of Andrew. But the fact that he said, well, here's a phone number. Oh, sorry, not phone number. It's like 1980s. Here's an email address if people want to participate in somehow. And he's yet to work that out. Yeah. And obviously some people won't feel able to. Some people just won't want to. Some people might do. He might get one person, but that's one person.
Yeah, exactly.
So we've not done anything particularly special, but we've even if we've just started to think maybe there should be a representative in this group.
Yeah.
That's something.
It's no different. I saw a conversation about on Twitter the other day about how many adoptees are on any panels. Well, I've always sat in a panel where there's been an adoptee present, and I have really respected their views, because actually they're the ones that have experienced where those children are. They've gone through that. They've gone through that process. They've gone through that life. Yeah. I haven't done that. All I've done is. I don't know what I've done. I don't know.
Well, no, I I guess I get for a little. I mean, we're way off Andrew here, aren't we? But we're onto something that's a rich vein of conversation. But
it's massive.
But I think that for me, there's a couple of things. One is that what have you done? You are an expert of your own experience.
Well, that's it.
Yeah, so that's a really common...
My experience.
Well,
just mine. Nobody else's.
Well,
just mine.
No, but it's a... You're being silly.
But but you know what I'm saying. But you know what I'm saying, because we've all got our own experience, haven't we?
Well, yeah,
every single one of us.
That's a social work kind of idea, is that people are expert at experience, and you should then draw them in to bring that expertise into a forum where it can be perhaps drawn out. However, your experience and my experience are also unique.
Yeah.
So you can't extrapolate every bit of my experience across a whole system. That's nonsense. You need to find kind of groups and themes and collective voices to enable some sort of sense to be made of that, so that you don't get... Where are you going? Scott's wandering around on his iPad. I don't know what he's doing. Bless him. So I'm not going to talk if you're going to do that.
Sorry, it's just there's a lot of racket and it started to get noisier. And now I've got a child. Go. Disappear. Oh, God. Honestly, you can't get peace in this house tonight.
Oh.
I do apologise. I'm trying to find a quiet space.
I couldn't hear any of the noise.
No, that's good, because I muted my microphone because it just went really loud all of a sudden.
I see.
I think, you know why? Because Nigel's here, that's why.
Oh, good grief.
Yeah, I know. He's trying to find me. Yeah, anyway. Wait a minute. Hopefully this will work, because I'm right next to the router. If I go outside, this is how bad my life has become. Right. Oh, that's better. It's quiet.
It is quiet.
It is.
I can't remember what I was up to.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. So I think that this idea that we are experts' experience is really helpful. But I think what frustrates me slightly in the debate online is that people are saying, well, you can't talk about adoption because you haven't been adopted. I think, well, actually, that's not true. I can talk about adoption because I am an adopter.
Exactly. It's just a different perspective.
Yes, I can't necessarily comment on what it feels like for all of that. I can tell you what I've observed. But I'd much rather that adoptees spoke for themselves.
Yeah, and I would as well.
But I can. I
guess going back to my point, that up until now they've not done it, and I welcome it with open arms, because I would rather that there was another side to all this, and that is the side of, I was adopted, I went through this process, I went through this, with it, I don't know.
Yeah.
As an example, the ASF application for therapy, and that really helped me, or it didn't help me, or I hate adoption, or I would rather that, whatever. It doesn't matter, but they need to be able to share that, so that we look at the system and work out what is the best way forward, because it's not for everybody. In the same way that, blooming porridge isn't for everybody. I'm not minimising the importance of it. I'm just saying we all have our own opinion on this. Yeah. And I do not regret anything to do with adopting. I really don't. It's just, it's what we've done. And I've loved every second of it, but that doesn't mean to say that everybody does. And that's just the way it is. And we have to respect each other's opinions and views on it. Yeah. The end.
Well, yeah, and I think, like you said, that would I do anything differently? Of course, I would.
Yeah,
but that's like that. It's everything in life, and not to minimise it, but every aspect of our lives, we look back and go, oh yeah, that was a bit of a mistake, and. Some of those questions are much bigger for adoption, adoptees, adopters.
Yeah, they're massive, yeah.
But that's the thing. So I found it really interesting that Andrew was open to that, and I did sort of squeeze him a bit about, I think the focus is on young people, but the fact that, like you said, but actually adoption is 30, the Children's Act is 30 years old this year. So there's people in their mid-30s who've been through that system roughly. So that was good. I was really pleased that he kind of acknowledged the issue around transracial adoption, because I've had these odd conversations where people have said, well, we can collect the data and it's onerous to collect the data, so we need to justify the requirement or justify the work put in. But I think actually for transracial adoption, I'm not necessarily coming up with a good reason why we should, but I just think we should. In the sense that I can't say, well, what are we going to do with that data? We're not going to develop service. What are we going to do with it? Well, I don't know what we're going to do with it, but I think we should flipping well know.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing, isn't it? With most of this data, what can we do with it? Maybe nothing, but actually at least we know.
Yeah.
That's it just seems obvious in my black and white brain that we should know.
We'll go
Doesn't
with that.
matter, yeah, exactly. My simplistic pop-up book reading thing.
Yeah, but also that, which links into the last thing which he sort of discussed. I cheekily asked him about collecting data for those children returning to care, and I think again, I mean, that's a tricky one, because where do you publish that? And last year there was 3,000 adoptions and 10% of them went back to care. That's hardly a great headline, but actually we need to know, don't we?
But it's important. I think it's important that we know that, and and also the reasons and what the kind of outcomes were, and because I mean, this is one of my things about listening and learning, because we're always learning. Every day is a school day on in this kind of situation. So we used to talk about adoption breakdowns.
Yeah.
And I get completely that an adoption breakdown is it's not what you think it is, because actually, in the same way that, I don't know, as an example, a birth child can move out at the age of 15.
Yeah.
Because they just don't get on with their parents. What do we call that? We don't. That doesn't even flag anywhere for anybody, unless, of course, children's services are involved. Or exactly. We know the figures on teenage pregnancy and all that sort of stuff. But this is different, because actually, we used to call it a breakdown. It's far from that, because
it's complex
still,
and
nuanced. It's so complex. But at the end of the day, just because you can't live under the same roof, it doesn't mean that you're not the son, daughter, mother, father of that child.
Or that might be the case.
Yeah, well,
but we don't know. Right now, we don't know
because we don't because we know from Julie Selwyn's what was it called?
Beyond, so you're dead good. Beyond the adoption order.
No, I meant research.
Research.
The word, not the. I knew what that was called. We know from that there were certain figures pulled out of that and what have you, and that was really, really quite hard hitting when it came out. It really was, and
But if you look at her research. If you go to the recommendations, you see that the stuff that she recommended really hasn't been enacted. No, she recommended that we look at violence and aggression, and because there's a massive link between anecdotally and it's hinted at this idea that the violent aggressive behaviour is acceptable in families, single child families. The minute it spills into other siblings, it then becomes a totally different dynamic, and the tensions on the family can lead to breakdown. But we need to know, not just guess.
We do. We need to know.
So I think I felt that was a really constructive conversation. Andrew was generous of his time and energy, and what I'd like to do is that we could come back in a year and come back and say, well, did you do that stuff? Yeah,
exactly. Because that's the key part, isn't it? It's what did you do about it? You mentioned it last year, but what did you do about it? Or what kind of influence have you had over it? Or what influence have adoptees had over the kind of the system, and or what changes are likely or starting to be made? Because let's face it, in a year you're not going to change the world, and politically right now the focus is on other stuff, I'm afraid. And it's certainly not on adoption.
Yes, but that reminded me, we have just got a new junior minister for children, haven't we?
Yeah, And I love how you said junior there, because our children are our future, and yet we appoint a junior minister.
Yes, and I'm googling it now because I forgot the name. It's because it's Kemi.
Yeah.
But I've never heard of her before.
No. Saffron Walden, which isn't far from my neck of the woods, but.
I spent a fortnight in Saffron Walden once. That's another story.
Dearie me. But background in banking and IT. So let's just see how it goes.
Well, yeah, I mean, you would have said Timpson, background in shoes and...
well, that's the thing, you don't know, do you? Because you don't, I mean, some of this stuff obviously, previous to Nadeem, because obviously Nadeem Sahawi was, what is it they call him?
YouGov. He was an entrepreneur, wasn't he?
No, but he was, oh, God, no, I'm not. I'm not even going to try and think of the words, but he came from another country as a...
immigrant.
That's the word.
Yeah, he's from Iran.
Yeah, but
Iraq, sorry.
But he came under that political kind of I can't remember. Anyway, I feel like I'm digging a massive hole for myself.
That was podcast gold. Scott ruins his career.
Knowledge.
But anyway, well, maybe we'll find out a bit more for the next podcast, and we'll be able to kind of get the lowdown.
You can Google a bit more.
Yeah, she says, I'm humbled to have been appointed a junior minister at the DFE. There you go.
Yeah.
That's fair enough. The one thing I will do is I'll put up the email that Andrew passed on to me. So if you are an adoptee and you've got this far, well done. You deserve a medal. Then if you adoptee, you got this far, then and it's something that floats your boat. Pass the email on, pass it around, and hopefully it'll bear some sort of fruit.
Send it to everybody.
Yeah.
And the other thing I was going to say as well, just while we're on the subject of adoptees, is our adoptee conversations.
Yes.
We are always, and you tweeted about this the other day, and you said something about the fact that we're always happy to talk to anybody, really, because every story is different.
Yes.
So if there are any adoptees who are listening and they want to get in contact to share their story, then do, because it's literally a conversation. And it was interesting. Polly said, her
friend of the show
went out. It went, friend of the show. Her interview went out as it was, and that was it. So, but anybody who wants to share their story, as in to make people aware of different experiences, then do get in touch.
That would be much appreciated. Same for adoptees, adopters, foster carers, care experienced.
Anybody who's experienced in this in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
We'll talk to anybody.
Yeah.
We don't mind.
Even if you've seen an advert on a bus on a roundabout, come on in, tell us your story.
Exactly, yeah, because likely it is you think it'll be easy. So,
excellent.
Whatever.
Well, I'm going to go because the night is late and I am young. I don't know.
I think you got that the wrong way round, really.
The night is young and I am late. I don't know. I'm confused.
You're old. And you need to go to your bed, obviously. I
do, very much so. Okay, well then, bless your heart. And tatty bye, and I'll see you soon.
Au revoir.
Bon Jovi.